Hello, my name is James Williams and welcome to another live MEF webinar. I'm Director of Programs with MEF. To those of you who may not know who MEF is the Mobile Ecosystem Forum. We've been around 20 years and we are the global neutral voice of the mobile ecosystem. And the key thing for me to say is that we are member-led. And I'm pleased to be joined today by 4 members of the ecosystem from 4 companies from all around the world to talk about business confidence. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce the 4 panelists. We have Sherwin Barlow from MTN in South Africa, John Wilkinson from TMT Analysis, Pat Flynn from Nettzer, and Mitch Cutmore from Telefonica, who's over in Brazil, although he's originally from Birmingham. So without further ado, moving to the panelists, Sherwin, go for it. Introduce yourself, your company, what you do.
Good day, everyone. I'm Sherwin Barlow. I'm from MTN South Africa, and I look after the enterprise mobility portfolio, focusing solely on MTN's internal WASP division. Glad to have everyone here.
So WASP, that's the whole. What's the WASP division?
So it's the wireless access service provider division. So all of the various different content services, bulk messaging, and all of the other engagement services.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sherwin. Next, John, go for it. TMT Analysis.
Hello. Thanks for having me, James. I'm John Wilkinson. I'm the CEO and founder of TMT Analysis here in London. We focus on a whole series of telecom data for MEF and the messaging market in particular. We provide a lot of routing information and routing data, numbering information. That's me.
Thank you. Thanks, John. Pat.
Yeah, hi, James. I'm Pat Flynn, and I've been in, as I say, I've been in this business quite a long time, but particularly actually SMS for a good 20 years. Currently, I'm the co-founder and director of business development for Nettzer, and we provide digital-first selling solutions to mobile operators. So delighted to be here. The panelists are all very impressive, and looking forward to hearing what they have to say.
Pat, no, thank you very much. And you join us from Dublin, and it's strange, but Dublin is an absolute hotbed of SMS and business messaging related technology. And there are many companies, of which quite a few are MEF members based in Dublin. And last but absolutely by no means least, we have our Brummie boy, Mitch.
Thank you, James, and thanks for the invite.
Good to have you.
As I mentioned, I'm here in Sao Paulo, so I came over here 5 years ago, which is when I joined Telefonica's global business messaging unit. And I've spent the past few years looking at our anti-fraud strategy and trying to share best practices throughout the group, particularly in Latin America. And now I'm now also looking at RCS. So not only how can we protect our businesses for the long term, but where are we going next? How is SMS evolving with the way we work with businesses? So that's me.
Exactly, because there's more to business messaging than SMS, as many of us do know, and we'll be sharing, I'm sure, some of that during this session. So what is this webinar all about? Every quarter, the Mobile Ecosystem Forum goes out to its members, conducts research, asks them what they feel about the confidence in their business in terms of how they see the wider market manifesting itself in terms of revenues with them, margins with them, etc., etc. We look at the past quarter results, we look at what our members think will happen in the next quarter. But if some of you joined a webinar exactly a week ago, you will have heard from the MEF board directors about what they think will be happening through 2021 and what will be the key drivers across the mobile ecosystem. And going slightly off topic and reservation, I'll be asking panelists here as well, given they're from all over the world, take advantage of having these 4 chaps here from all over the world and ask them as well what they think will be happening through 2021 and the key drivers and any surprises. But let's start with the main research. Some of you watching this will have already seen the research and actually looked at the results. But for me, there were a couple of surprises popping up. And actually, let's get straight into it. John, What was surprising for you from the research?
Not much or a lot. I thought most of the research was pretty bang on. I think that the identity space and mobile's role in that was, I think I would disagree a bit with the analysis. But I think in general, if you look at the state of the market, I think it tallies quite well with other research. I was just reading yesterday for this, that some research from The Economist for next year around what's going on in mobile. And they're not very bullish about subscriber numbers, about ARPUs. It's quite conservative, really. I think they were saying 3% growth in subscribers to 3% higher than pre-COVID, only is not very much considering that watching around the world. So not too much that I disagreed with. I thought it was reasonably consistent. I think the other thing is it's very hard to know, right? Everyone's guessing because of the impact of COVID. I think one other area, we see, which I don't think came across in the research, was around digital onboarding. I think there's been a huge amount of that last year, into next year, how that developed, how that continues. That would be really fascinating, especially with the move to the OTTs and the to Google's looking at providing additional services and also additional pressure in the market next year. So in general, I thought most of the research was
okay, yeah. So for those of you not aware of what John's talking about with regards to the personal data and identity space, the confidence index is basically 78% of businesses thought Q4 were confident, but they thought moving forward to Q1 21 this year, that confidence would actually decrease 16% down to 62%. There's a real marked drop in that. And could be potential reasons why, but possibly thinking that actually people with hopefully solutions coming along for COVID, people may move back into the physical space, perhaps. Could be that, I don't know. Anyway, Pat, moving to you, what did you find from the research? Anything groundbreaking from the results? But remember, this is what our members, these are our feelings and sentiments of our members.
Well, when you consider what industry you could be in, this is a good industry to be in, because it's really, there are dips, but by and large, the industry is doing well and holding up. There's, I mean, if you consider the bricks and mortar industries, travel industries, they're seriously impacted. I think the pessimism, I agree with John, I think the pessimism was overstated. I have personal insight in, I live in Ireland and I'm associated with charity that says 11 retail shops, and they had to close down at the first shutdown for 4 months. So we changed the business plan. We predicted that a severe drop in revenue because we do provide services for deaf people. After we opened up again, there was a huge burst in activity, and it looks like 2020 will be better than 2019, despite the lockdown. And I think people are accumulating cash, and they're spending on what might be in discretionary spend. But that's just a small slice of life there. But if you look at the Apple numbers for Q4, Apple bust out the door in Q4. So people are accumulating cash. I think the impact in the industry is that what you might call the ongoing competition within the industry between operators and against the quote free services. And it will result in ARPUs dropping. It will result in subscribers churning. But by and large, if you're going to be in an industry, this is not the worst one to be in.
No, I would actually agree with that. And this is where, again, operators, I'm sure we'll talk about it. And we have two operators here who are business messaging experts as well. Sherwin, let's go to you in South Africa. I don't know what you're seeing. We heard from Pat, obviously talking about Ireland and the areas he operates in with people able to save some money. What's going on in South Africa? What's your spend like from your enterprise clients in terms of messaging and other products you look after?
Yeah, I think as they say, COVID really disrupted our industry, and I think Africa being very under-indexed with regards to connectivity and their digital strategy, in the last 8-12 months, I think we've seen some very good growth. And as Pat said, it's a good industry to be in. I mean, in my portfolio, I've seen high double-digit growth with regard to enterprise clients spending on their digital strategy. They obviously wanting to grow the enterprise engagement communication channels with their consumers. So all mobile, going mobile advertising, mobile online payment platforms are being launched, and also enabling customers to obviously have access to content at no cost to them because of the market that they are servicing, and obviously the data costs being quite impacting. So from a consumer side, I think the enterprises have been forced to step in to ensure that their end customers can still engage with them through various different channels. Now that we've seen quite a bit of an increase in spend on our side.
Good news. Mitch, over to you. And we're talking more than just Brazil, really. The whole of Latin America, you've got a whole good overview and picture in Latin America as to what's going on. What have your business messaging numbers been like, for example, through 2020?
Yeah, well, I thought it was interesting what Pat mentioned about this kind of persisting pessimism, because COVID kind of really hit here in Latin America around kind of March time, and what we saw was almost an initial kind of shock to the system across all the countries. So the first month where each country was impacted, it kind of looked as if all big businesses were kind of freezing almost, like, let's stop everything and let's see what's going to happen. And actually what happened was things quite quickly, let's say over a period of 3 months, kind of got back to some kind of normal. And in many countries actually started to grow. So that was kind of the pattern we saw across Latin America. And I think what's interesting about the study and the results is that if you kind of look at how the results are spread out, you can see that actually there's very little middle ground almost in the results. So there's a group of people who feel very optimistic and that we're actually going to see good growth going forward. And then at the other end, there's quite a large chunk of people who feel very differently, and that we're going to see quite large declines. And if you look even across most of the countries, the middle ground is not really there. So it seems like people have very different opinions on how this is going to play out. But I mean, looking at the last 9 months for us, I think we've seen quite a, going back to a steady scenario almost. So I certainly don't feel that pessimistic from my point of view.
Good, yeah, I think we can all understand, particularly talking about mobile network operators, your roaming revenues will definitely have been massively impacted for sure, absolutely. But then other things, possibly business messaging, has helped offset those. Now, one thing I've seen coming up in the past year more and more, people, the average citizen, has been really thrown into the digital world, and also the brick and mortar establishments that Pat, you were mentioning as well. More traditional companies who hadn't embraced digital transformation, all the benefits that can bring, they were forced to embrace it in double quick time. And that has opened the door for some potential not so good stuff coming along, potential fraud, etc., etc. How have governments, let's start with Pat for this, how have governments, do you think, reacted in the past year from what you're seeing? Have they started to understand they need to do more to help protect and guide their citizens through this?
Yeah, I guess I think everyone is shocked. Despite that our industry is held up because we're ideally positioned to deal with non-physical contact. That's what we're all about. There's clearly an economic impact, and I suppose the Irish government, like every government in Europe and probably every major government around the world, has been borrowing and spending and subsidizing. I think we're in the race now between the subsidies running out and the vaccine kicking in. So let's hope that, again, I'm sure I'm looking around, I'd be aware of other countries and actually, I'd be particularly interested to hear about South America and Africa, because I don't have good visibility on what's happening there. But yeah, there has been an uptick in scams. There's, you know, even the most, shall we say, basic, like two-factor authentication would really help there. And I think a lot of SMEs who are moving to digitized platforms for the first time are falling into that trap. I'm not sure if the messages from the government are going to make much of a change, James, because there's so much messaging from the government. It's, you know, there's so much stuff about the COVID, but yeah, I think you put your finger on it. There's the digitization has released a bunch of new scams, and clearly classic two-factor authentication would be a big help in that area.
I've got a webinar actually in a couple of weeks' time talking about the whole area of education. And I think what you talked about, Pat, with 2FA rings really true, because out there, you hear a lot of talk about now, oh, SMS isn't secure for two-factor authentication. And within the Mobile Ecosystem Forum, and I know some people here on this live webinar are doing some great work, what we call a fraud framework and a code of conduct in this area. But surely having some form of two-factor authentication, whatever you may think about SMS, for example, is better than nothing. John, what's your take on what could be done more to protect the average subscriber out there, and what should be done?
Yeah, I think it's a good story, actually, particularly in the MEF. You know, just thinking about Telefonica, for instance, because Mitchell's here. You know, they've done a lot of work in rolling out new product. I guess it's in a sense coincidental because it takes so long to roll out those kind of products. But I mean, now they're just getting much more prevalence around, you know, SIM swap, call forwarding, 2FA, and KYC type products as well, right, for customer onboarding. I think that's particularly important. You know, if you think about a hotel or you know, any kind of business going online for the first time, thinking about how to digitally accept customers is really crucial. And I think mobile can play an important part in that across the world. So it's not surprising that it wasn't really ready when the pandemic hit. And so I think over the next 12, 18 months, we'll see a lot more product from the mobile networks, but also from other parts of the market and from government. So I think the crackdown on two-factor authentication fraud, on identity management will be really important. I think I do what Twitter does, Google does, actually have an impact on the market as they start to try and deal with fraudulent accounts, fake accounts, EKAs, pseudonyms, all those ridiculous things at them, and how that's managed, I think, from an identity perspective.
Yeah, thanks, John. And over to you, Sherwin, because actually you're very much involved in this. In MEF, we have a group actually looking particularly at banking fraud in South Africa, which is a real issue. And the government's involved there, the banking associations involved, so many different people are involved in this. What are you seeing with regards to extra measures that possibly are being done by authorities, enterprises and everyone to protect the average consumer on the street?
Yeah, I think over the last 2 years, the government has definitely stepped in and basically forced mobile operators to implement various different models and techniques to obviously protect the end consumer, because I think the biggest kind of fraud is also stealing of airtime with regards to content services that users are subscribed to without any of their permission. And government has since then enforced a whole lot of regulations on mobile operators to ensure that they take care of all of these elements. And we always like to look at it with regards to what are we doing with regards to the customer from a content-based side and also from a transaction side. So from a transaction, we're ensuring that the consumer is always protected, and that we're trying to see that every single transaction is actually tracked and traced, where we're exposing network data to banks to ensure that before they actually approve a transaction, they could actually ensure that it is a valid transaction and that there's no SIM swaps that have taken place within the last hour and the last couple of hours, and then obviously approve that. We're also looking at some network initiated USSDs for transactions where if you want to withdraw some cash or anything like that, we can initiate a network USSD code to you, and you can then obviously approve a transaction. From the content side, we're obviously trying to ensure that there's a lot of easier ways for the users to opt out. We also want to ensure that from a customer side, that customers are starting to be a lot more educated around fraud. Because I think that is a big element in South Africa. I mean, just today I received a call from a family member telling me that my airtime, every time I load airtime, just disappears. And that's the extent to which it is. It's very personal because these guys are just subscribing you to content services and taking all of the consumers' monies. And I think that should be a big focus for us moving into this year to ensure we close all of those loopholes. Yeah.
And I think it's a big issue with governments as well, because how much involvement do they take? Because it could come across as too heavy-handed, slowing down everything, preventing business. But then they've got to do something, though, particularly in cases where people, in some situations, heard of here in the UK with, for example, SMS phishing, because MEF have a UK sender registry ID project. I've heard of cases there where people essentially have their life savings wiped out. It's rare, but it can happen. So there's a thin line between being too heavy-handed and not doing enough. It's a tough thing to follow. Mitch, what are you seeing over in Latin America with regards to governments, regulations, and anything like that to protect consumers at the end of the day?
Well, yeah, I don't know if we've seen necessarily new regulation come into place, but we've certainly seen greater use of SMS by governments to kind of maintain communication happening. And I think, we've seen that in Mexico, for instance, where there's a daily COVID update that's going out, to millions of people. And that's been going on for a while. And that's something that we've seen kind of replicated in other countries. But linking it back to fraud, I think what we've seen in general is two kind of different reactions. So we've seen people who perhaps weren't as used to working with other SMS catch up. So for instance, in Chile, we've had a couple of banks who weren't, for instance, using two-factor authentication via SMS to its full potential, and then very quickly sort us out to be able to get customers internet banking online, etc. I think governments as well have perhaps now realised the full potential of SMS as a fallback, channel to communicate with everyone. And I think on the other hand, we've got people who are realising that actually, if people who already work with SMS, SMS is great, but RCS and other channels perhaps take it further. So in Brazil, for instance, we've had a couple of proof of concepts about COVID, which not only do they provide an opportunity to communicate with customers, but actually to present them with a series of links. So, in this kind of scenario where there's various different kinds of information that, end users need to receive, being able to use a carousel within RCS, being able to make it more attractive using images, to get people's attention has been important. So I think those are the two kind of scenarios we're working with. And obviously for fraud, it presents new opportunities. So we have seen, phishing, smishing on the basis of, luring people in with the promises of a vaccine. So I
was going to say, for the uninitiated, you could just explain what smishing is.
Yep, so smishing is our messages sent to kind of lure customers into responding to a message, clicking on a link and revealing personal information so that a bad actor can, either gain access to their accounts or abuse their personal information in some other way. So this scenario is a case of a company sending a message to customers posing to be a health provider offering a COVID vaccine, whereby someone may respond to the message, click on a link, give their personal details, social security number, and then any number of other scenarios can unfold as a result of that. So as always, fraudsters remain creative. They will take advantage of any scenario. So our guard kind of needs to continue to be up.
Yeah,
always.
I think it's fair to say that on many different webinars, and indeed just look across the ecosystem, there are lots of people point their fingers quite a lot at mobile operators and saying mobile operators could be doing more to prevent all of this. Do you agree, large part, that there really isn't in the mobile community globally, there isn't enough awareness of these issues and how to protect themselves and their people?
Yes, I mean, that's my job. That's why I exist. It's because there is more that we can do. I think the challenge that operators have is we are in a difficult place right now with kind of customer privacy, right? In terms of, you know, how far can you go and where is the balance in between sacrificing perhaps privacy or allowing operators and other actors within the messaging chain to you know, be privy to your messaging to a certain extent with the aim of protecting you. And that's kind of a conversation which I don't think operators have had internally. It's not a dialogue that we're having with customers in terms of we can protect you, but that requires that, you know, we have access to certain things that you need to know about. And it's also a conversation that needs to happen with regulators. And I think in Latin America, from my experience, regulators generally have a very strict customer protection mentality, which is more than understandable, but that limits extremely what we can do to protect customers against things like smishing. So that conversation needs to mature to a point where we can sit down with regulators and say, we need your help to understand, do we leave customers exposed to this, or can we discuss ways that we can responsibly protect customers, you know, analysing the content of messages, identifying smishing campaigns, etc. So I think that's the main layer that we're missing, is weighing out those two factors.
Thanks. And over to you, Pat, because I know you work closely with mobile operators. That is your business, isn't it? Digital onboarding. If you could explain a little bit about what it is you do and potential increase in demand you're seeing, and why companies are really switching on and need to embrace what you offer.
Yeah, the issue really is, particularly with COVID, is that some of our customers are the mobile operators. It doesn't want to send its agents to meet somebody and expose themselves to COVID. But it's also part, I think, of the general move to fully digital channels. As we're all aware here, there's digital banks. I think Revolut or N26 or in different markets. I'm sure there's different markets in different banks in South America and South Africa. And we've onboarded with them very simply with a driver's license and a self-ID. And we're seeing this being embraced now by mobile operators as another channel. So you've retail, you have your agent channel, you might have your direct channel, but digital is another channel coming in. And it does, like all digital processes, it does has the advantage of ubiquity, 24/7, lower cost. So while it's actually had a bit of a kick this year with COVID, I don't think it's going to go away. I mean, the general pressure, and we're dealing with operators here who are very tuned into the market. They're experiencing the inter-operator competitive pressure on prices and reach and so on. So essentially, but I think from the point of view of the current conversation is the issue, say, of IoT SIMs going out. They may not be registered. If you want to ensure that a SIM isn't being used for fraud, you need the legal identification of the owner of that SIM. So I can see this wave coming. It's less a technical or regulatory requirement to onboard customers. It's actually a commercial channel that's developing, and you can see particularly. I think I saw some of the Indian operators have already moved down that road.
Yeah, so I saw Nigeria. I saw a few posts yesterday in Nigeria. They've got a really, really aggressive schedule. They've got 106 million Nigerians that need to have a national identity number associated with their SIM, and there's a massive rush and there's this crazy short time frame to do it. So that's putting, I think, undue pressure on so many. So that perhaps is stretching it a little too far. John, what are you seeing? Because I know, even though you're based in the UK, TMT, you have business globally. What are you seeing at the moment with regards to the whole digital space and embracing it?
Yeah, just one thing I think to think about, particularly from the MEF reports, is one thing that doesn't really come across is the change to work. You know, the getting rid of the office. You know, what's that going to mean to productivity? And I think, you know, from our business, we're a pretty small business, but we see managing existing customers and existing products has actually been probably easier. Whereas doing new things is harder, just because you're not all sitting together, you're not on top of each other. Can't hold wires as easily as you could before. So, you know, maximizing existing business seems to have been a bit easier or a bit better, but actually breaking into new areas seems a bit harder. And, you know, we're a little business, but, you know, when you think of, you know, MTN and Telefonica, right, how to manage those businesses now with the massive change in culture and productivity. So I think there's an awful lot of issues, even within telecom, in mobile, around how this is a function, how they can support in this new kind of new world. So I think that's another real interesting impact as well. And
yeah,
management and leadership, you know, how to manage and lead an organisation is a challenge I think about a lot. And it's very different now. You know, motivate staff. I think there's a whole series of different things that are kind of almost impossible to know.
Okay, thank you, John. And Sherwin, over in South Africa, how do you stop people getting left behind? Because there seems to be an assumption with so much of this digital onboarding and that you need a smartphone, but not everyone has a smartphone. And what do you do to stop people from being left behind? Because at the end of the day, our webinar today is all really about confidence and business confidence. But if consumers feel as though they're left behind, that's going to knock confidence for sure. So how are things being done to include people who don't have smartphones, who may not necessarily have internet connectivity and everything, to protect them?
Yeah, so I think that's the conundrum we're currently facing. I mean, all of the enterprises are trying to obviously move and transform towards a digital strategy where they are turning on or switching on all of their channels towards online, ensuring that the users are obviously needing to have smartphones and access to data. And for us in product development, we just ensure that we cater for all customers. And one example of doing that, for example, with regards to banks, today there's products such as reverse billing where we ensure that each and every user, irrespective of him having data or not, would have access to a mobile banking app. And we ensure that the bank then picks up the cost to ensure that the customer would always have the tool to be able to engage. And we slowly remove all of those barriers. And with regards to transactional based activities, we ensure that the user has, based on the type of phone that the user has, we ensure that he receives communication in that format, and also that he'll be able to perform a similar transaction through a USSD, where if he doesn't have a smartphone, he could perform a very similar transaction via USSD channel. And yeah, we're seeing this trend where we're ensuring that when we develop products, we need to have the focus and ensure that we also cater for the minimalists and the ones that is not as fortunate as the others, and that's our opportunity, because that's where we ensure that enterprises picks up the ball to ensure that their customers are always engaged, and that's the type of products that we develop.
Yeah, I have to admit, when we first spoke actually at the end of last year, I'd never heard of the reverse billing side of things. I wasn't actually aware of it. Possibly should have been, but I wasn't. So it was really, really, really good. That's absolutely
So in a country like ours, that's very powerful. I can tell you the growth just on that singular product was super exponential, because everyone needs to ensure that their users have access to content and their digital engagement channels, but the users that you are dealing with has a barrier, and this is data, as well as in all of the other different channels. For example, we're also seeing that SMS in itself is slowly starting to die, because the consumers are moving to various different other channels in which they want to receive their communication. And that's where we're just developing for all of the different customer types. And that's where opportunities lie.
Yeah, I think it's exactly. So when we talk about A to P in the industry, 99% of us who are in the industry are thinking in our heads, oh, we're talking SMS, but actually A to P does not mean that. It means every channel you can think of across business messaging. Correct. So yeah, fantastic. Over to you, Mitch. What do you see happening across Latin America? And also, let's talk about the rest of 2021 and future things. What do you think will be happening this year in terms of being able to restore some confidence, shall we say, across the ecosystem? I appreciate that there are some companies that are doing very, very well, some sectors doing exceedingly well. But if we look outside of the average business, particularly smaller businesses that aren't the Googles, the Amazons, et cetera, what do we as an industry need to do to bring back that confidence?
Yeah, well, I think the first one is enabling small, medium businesses, right? So the kind of business that perhaps haven't worked with messaging before and now need to digitalize their business to keep going. That's thankfully something that a lot of our countries have been working on for a while, in terms of creating self-service, cross-operator solutions that small, medium businesses can get online with and start working with, with minimum fuss. I think that will continue, and greater value will be given to that within operators, and I think that's positive. And then I think, on a larger scale, I think RCS is going to get a big push forward across the region. So
Mitch, I'm coming back to you again. I'm not using you as a telecommunications dictionary, but again, for the uninitiated who are listening, what is RCS?
Yep, RCS, so Rich Communication Services, is what we kind of are looking to now as the evolution in RCS, in SMS. So what's essentially different is that it provides operators and users with a kind of multimedia interactive channel, which in some senses is a move closer to similar kind of OTT communication solutions. So what it does essentially is enable us to build upon the existing customer relationships we've built within the A2P ecosystem, but allowing these businesses now to build entire workflows within a communications channel. So whereas for many years SMS has been a one-way channel, occasionally with replies where that's an option, RCS really allows customers to have conversations with their brands, to seek out brands proactively when they need help, and to be able to resolve various different things within this one space. So as I mentioned earlier, carousels with links, and also in the future payment options as well. So we believe that this is going to be very important for the next 3 to 5 years for what's going to happen with operators. And we're now at the phase where the different countries are starting to take notice and are starting to invest time to understand the opportunities around RCS and to making it happen.
Yeah, for me, it's 3 words: conversational business messaging, and anything that can enable that and help any size business is absolutely great. Pat, with regards to security, digital onboarding, and everything like that, the one thing we haven't talked about at the moment is biometrics. Now, biometrics, facial recognition, even people recognizing the shape of people's ears being so different one to the other, being totally different. Do you see more of that? And how is that going to be enabled practically, for example, in your world of digital onboarding? What can happen? What do you see happening?
Yeah, so actually the technology is quite advanced now, and it's available off, for example, Amazon, Google, and so on, using AI technology. The recognition rate is quite high, in the region of 95 to 97%. So if you can, for the sake of argument, if you can onboard, say, 95% of your customers digitally, the ones that you have a question over, you can refer them to call center. There is a race on, as everybody knows here. There's always a race on between the fraudster and the security people, but and I think people probably have seen these deep fakes, which are very convincing videos of Bill Clinton, hugging Donald Trump or something like that. Or maybe that actually happened. I don't know. But the point really is that what you're doing with the digital channels, and similar to maybe the fraud prevention in the A2P space, is you assure a certain level of confidence. And if you have a doubt on the rest of it, you can bring it up another level. So you apply multiple layers. The devices today clearly are very biometric friendly, but even your basic picture, if you get we've done data tests, and essentially you can get, if you get between 70 and 100 images, you can train the AI to recognize a particular document, for example. So it might be a driver's license from a particular jurisdiction. If you get 70, 100 samples, it'll learn that pretty well. So it's moving quite well. And again, you have to keep an eye on it. The fraudsters are clever too, so it's a bit of a battle.
Yeah, thank you. And John, over to you. If I could just ask you, could you switch off your video because your connection's a little bit choppy, and you respond, that would be helpful. Thank you, John. Appreciate that. I've got the face for radio. You've got a very nice face, so but off we go. Talking about digital identity and that side of things, who will own it? I think this is the issue with regards to confidence. There's this I find it very, very strange. People put so much personal information about themselves on their social media accounts, everything like that. But heaven forbid any one of you sends a spam SMS to an individual. Sometimes people will call the mobile operator call center. What was this? Why did I receive that? And it becomes a big deal. So why did I receive this? Why did I receive that? So it's this very strange dichotomy. So who do you see owning this digital identity moving forward? Will it be the operator? Will it be governments? Could it be even it's present on the handset? I don't know. And we need to restore confidence somehow that with all this technology, that we won't be getting too far ahead of ourselves and ultimately letting too much knowledge into the hands of people who perhaps should not have that. John, what do you see happening?
Yeah, I think that's the interesting question, and no one knows yet. So the kind of the model, like a YEX type model of distributed identity control, where individuals control their data sets and then release them as required for different use cases, sounds perfect, but it possibly won't get the level of ubiquity that it needs. And so I think for quite a long time, probably 3 to 5 years, it's going to be kind of horses for courses, to use an expression. A requirement for high friction, high knowledge, biometric access. And then at the bottom end, there's going to be a need for just sort of screen popping, simple checks. Does this look like the right customer? Probably. It will be a very common use case, I think, in the internet going forward. So I think there's going to be a whole range of different solutions. I think what government do is enormously important. if you look at the big guys, Google, Amazon, Microsoft, they've all got quite different approaches at the moment to identity management. And so I think that tells a story in itself, that there's not going to be a one-size-fits-all solution, one winner, or at least if there is, no one knows who it is yet. So I think it's quite an interesting market because it's so fragmented, so different, so kind of emerging.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you, John. Sherwin, over to you. So, mobile operators, you have a ton of juicy information on your subscribers. Really nice information that you can A, use to help subscribers, and B, actually monetize. What are you doing within MTN South Africa to realize that actually, for example, you know how long your subscribers have been with you, if people are paying their bills regularly? Do you offer that type of information to enterprises, for example, to help them make a decision, to get confidence that actually that person is who they say they are?
Yeah, so there's a couple of areas where we actually do provide this, but we refrain away from any personal information of any of our subscribers. But there's a lot of network information that we can provide. I think earlier I alluded to the example where we can definitely see the timestamp of when a SIM card was swapped. We can definitely see some digital identity of the SIM card on the network. And this is a good and bad thing, because this could be used by various enterprises to approve certain transactions that consumers make. And this digital identity, if it's stolen, that's the bad element. And we obviously try and protect this with our lives, because we always say a telco can even become a credit bureau with all of the information that we actually do have about the subscriber. And I think more and more we're closing down on the personal information, but the information that's allowed to be exposed to ensure that our clients are more protected and that there's more secure transactions. We are exposing this, and to a certain extent, we definitely commercializing it and turning it into some revenue generating arm, where, for example, for the banks, to do a check with regards to when a SIM was swapped, when your client wants to do a transaction, we charge you a certain fee for every check that you do on the customer. So yeah, it's also an opportunity for us, and yeah, the data that's sellable, we're trying to sell.
No, obviously you're anonymous. You should profit from it, but I think it's important, and Mitch, I don't know if you agree, but I think it's really important for mobile operators to get out there that they're doing as much as they can to protect their subscribers as well, because there's a risk within the European GDPR, for example, the EU or the European Economic Area, with GDPR, you can hide behind that and say, no, we're not going to do this because of GDPR. But actually, there is a lot you can do to protect subscribers. What's your take within Telefonica, and indeed, what other operators should be doing to help protect and bring that confidence back to individuals?
So yeah, first of all, I think data is obviously very valuable and is an important tool in protecting subscribers. I think within Telefonica, from my experience, the data does exist. However, kind of joining up the dots and being able to kind of bring those different data points together is not always that easy. So for instance, talking about SIM swap solutions, that's something that goes hand in hand with secure A2P messaging. But actually, because of the way companies grow and how initiatives emerge within a multinational company, that sits somewhere else. So joining that up and creating a kind of joint proposition and being able to take that to banks is actually quite difficult. And that also applies with kind of fraud data as well. So being able to get a holistic view is still very difficult. But in terms of what other things can we do, I think even before data, operators can look at their own policies, products, and processes, and look at how we can do just kind of our homework, really, in terms of, in many countries in Latin America, unlimited SMS offers are still very prevalent. And until we can limit that, we're kind of halfway opening the door for SIM farms as well. And that's just one example in terms of the way we run our business, you know, at every level, in many ways actually opens the door. And therefore, there's difficult conversations that are necessary internally for many operators to be able to, you know, to get a better grip on this issue, because it's not only resolved by firewalls. And I think that's a common misconception, is that a firewall will resolve the problem. It will do the heavy lifting, but it won't solve everything.
No, not at all. If a subscriber agreement says unlimited SMS and the consumer laws within a country say unlimited has to be truly unlimited, then no little asterisk and fair usage policy applies. Paragraph from an operator is going to help you. Not at all. Pat, we're about, let me have a look at my clock here. Yes, we're about 8 minutes away from the close on the hour. So just like to start wrapping this up with closing remarks. Generally, with 2021, how do you see the year playing out? Just generally, economically, when do you see us being actually able to get out physically, see each other, conferences to start happening, and some real confidence to get back into markets? Because at the end of the day, the average person out there has got to feel confident to really start then spending and drive economies globally. What do you see happening? Crystal ball, please.
That's a good question, James, and I suppose it's difficult. I'm sure everybody here has been looking at the rate of vaccination in various markets. I mean, I'm guessing from what I've seen of Europe and the UK, if I can put those two together just for this conversation, I'll probably look at, I guess Q3 or something like that might be where it's going to hit. You know, I'm guessing Q3 it has sufficient level of vaccination, and the good weather will be there. People will be a bit more optimistic. But I think it may get a bit darker just before we get there in this quarter, because this is sort of like we're exhausted now. We're so exhausted from this. But overall, as I said at the beginning, in terms of pure numbers, in terms of for the industry, I think it could be a better year than last year, maybe marginally, but I'm sure it'll certainly hold its own.
John, you're over to you. Closing remarks.
Yeah, I think it's the things that are going to stay with us that are going to be the most interesting. You know, the lack of commuting, lack of international travel, working remotely. I think those things are going to stay with us at least to a degree, and what impact that has on business and that has on sales and that has on customers, I think it's going to be really important. So yeah, I think tons of opportunity to embrace those changes, and I think on balance, you know, one, our industry is a great place to be comparative to more, and two, you know, I think the message industry itself is also going to decline this year. See uptick across multiple areas and all geographies. So I remain quite optimistic.
Yeah, thank you, John. Over to you, Sherwin. So, what's the feeling in South Africa? People on the streets, people out there, and indeed across other opcos you have in Africa. What's the feeling out there for this year in terms of confidence, generally? Later in the year, perhaps.
Yeah, I think people are definitely nervous with the unpredictability of the situation that we are in. But I think with the industry that we are in, I think it's time now more than ever to enable our customers to go digital. I think the opportunity is there, and we need to really grab this with two hands and ensure that we have good products that enable our enterprises and our consumers to feel safe and also continue engaging, because I think in our industry, we're the only ones that can ensure that the wheels keep turning. And yeah.
I think, you know, for me, you really hit the nail on the head there, and that people continue to keep engaging, because on the face of it, if you're an enterprise, suddenly you've had your leg swept out from underneath you, loads of your revenues have gone. There's a temptation to cut your marketing, your client engagement costs massively.
Correct.
Perhaps do less messaging. Let's not use SMS, let's use email, which is free. But we know how powerful channels like SMS are. But that's not something you've seen. So businesses in South Africa have still been continuing to use the likes of SMS and haven't cut their budgets with you, for example.
Yeah, it depends on the type of industry. I think our big clients for messaging is definitely the banks. And I think the banks in itself, they've rather increased their communication, increased the amount of awareness messages that goes out to their customers. So industry dependent. There's a couple that has obviously pulled the brakes and has gone dead. But with regards to retail, they're advertising more than ever. Banks are sending out notifications more than ever. And I think it's going to be, if we go back to the new normal, it will be hard to see the numbers that we've been seeing in the last couple of months, because as I keep saying, it's been very rapid growth. But yeah, I think we just need to enable them to keep engaging.
Exactly. So I'd just like to thank all my panelists today. Sherwin, thank you for joining us from South Africa. Mitch, Brazil. John from UK, and Pat over in Ireland. Thank you all very much for joining us. And it's been absolutely fantastic. If anyone has any questions, please do share, but I haven't seen any questions as yet. And I think the answer is no one really has a crystal ball. No one really knows what will happen this year, but certainly our research from within MEF across our members, across the mobile ecosystem, is generally positive, that most of the ecosystem feels positive. But of course, this is not a reflection on every business and every individual across the world. So wherever you are, all the best to you. Thank you very much for joining in. Apologies that I still have got to learn how to mute and unmute correctly. I only did it twice, so there is room for improvement, Mr. Williams, and I will improve. But thank you all for joining, and all the very best to you, wherever you may be. Goodbye.